Welcome to this episode of the Fire Away Q&A. And today we have an awesome question that I'm super excited to answer. And it comes to us from Tony Dempsey. And Tony writes, Corey, sorry to bother you, but I'm needing a little advice. I'm a 50-year-old elk calling beginner. I live in Kentucky and have only elk hunted twice, but my goal is to get out west at least every other year and will be going to Colorado again this September. I've never used a diaphragm and bugle tube. I picked up a double reed diaphragm the other day and have worked with it some, but I'm finding it really difficult to hit the lower notes. I can hit the high note and hold it with no problem. I just can't start low and bring those notes to the top. I consider myself pretty skilled with a turkey diaphragm, and I know the elk call is much different, but I tend to put a lot of pressure on a call and was wondering what you may think would be the best call for me to start out with. Also, I'll take any tips on tongue placement, pressure, and techniques that you might offer. Thanks again, Tony. So Tony, great question, and one that I'm super excited to touch on today because for me, the thrill of elk hunting is calling. And one of the most difficult things to learn to master when it comes to calling elk is the diaphragm elk call. And with so many different shapes and sizes of mouths and palates and frames and all the different components that go into making a diaphragm elk call, it can get really confusing on trying to select one that will work for you. So I'm going to touch on just a few basic things that maybe will help make that selection process a little bit easier and help you maybe get off to the right start in finding the call that'll work for you. So Tony, you mentioned that you'd picked up a double reed turkey diaphragm, and I just want to touch on that briefly. Most elk call diaphragms that I would suggest are going to be single latex design, and that means they just have a single layer of latex. Sometimes, especially in turkey calls, you'll find a dual layer or a double layer of latex there. And that's really helpful for a turkey call because what that does is it gets those latexes popping. And when you make a turkey call, it's that really abrupt popping sound. But when it comes to an elk call, and especially cow calling and bugling, you want a diaphragm that's going to allow you to produce a very smooth transition up the scale and back down without the popping. So with a turkey call or a double latex call, a lot of times you're going to get that popping sound. It's going to break in the middle of your call. Another thing that you mentioned, Tony, was that you're having troubles getting the low note. And again, with a double latex diaphragm, it's going to allow you to put a lot more pressure on that call before it stalls out. The problem with that is you lose your lower end of the call. So what I'm going to talk about today are single latex, single layer, single reed diaphragm elk calls. And they just utilize one layer of latex. And I feel that's going to give you the most control and the most consistency and the most variation in your calls by using a single latex call. But before I really jump in and start talking about some of the specifics and how to use the call, I want to point out a couple of the design features in the call that are going to make a huge difference in how the call performs for you. And the first one is the frame size. So the frame size is just the metal part of the diaphragm and the width of that. And it really makes a difference. If you get a really narrow one, you aren't going to have near the range on the call. If you get a really wide one, you aren't going to have as much control. So it's going to be important that you really find one that fits your mouth. And if you have a wider palate, you might need a wider frame. Just realize you're going to be giving up a little bit with that frame as opposed to maybe one that's more middle of the road there. So I always prefer a middle of the road, a medium width frame, and I would suggest anybody starting out, especially a beginner, to start there because that's going to get you, if you go with a narrow one and then find out you've got a wide palate, you've got to buy maybe a medium and a large to find out. If you go with the medium, you're going to be able to tell is this too wide or too narrow, and if you have to change, you're going to be able to go up to a wider or a narrower, but not have to get two more diaphragms to find out. So that's important. Probably the most important aspect of a diaphragm call is the thickness and the stretch of the latex. And if you imagine a blade of grass, when you pick it up, as you blow air across it, when you pull tighter on that, it gets you a higher pitch, a higher note. And a diaphragm call is the same way. The tighter that it's stretched, the higher the note you're going to be able to produce with that. But then again, you're going to lose that bottom end and not be able to get that lower end. So it's important to look at how they're stretched as well as the thickness, because the thicker that is, the harder it's going to be to get the diaphragm to make noise. And you want to definitely get one that allows you to easily make noise. That's going to allow you to control the noise you make a lot better. So I always suggest starting out with a medium stretch, medium thickness latex. Again, to go with that medium width on the frame size, that's going to put you in the center. And I've found for me, that's actually the sweet spot. So I can make cow calls, I can make bugles, I can be loud, I can be quiet, full range of sounds, full range of control with that middle of the road latex. So I would suggest starting there. Understand that if you go with a really thin latex, it's going to really go up and hit those high notes easily. You aren't going to have to put a lot of tongue pressure or air pressure on it. With a thicker latex, the opposite. You're going to have to put a lot more air and tongue pressure on it to get those high notes, as well as to be able to control them and hold them. So starting with middle of the road with that medium thickness latex, I think is going to give us the best chance. So to hopefully save you from buying 100 different diaphragm calls, that kind of narrows it down from there. But from there, you might be a person who blows a little harder on the diaphragm or uses more tongue pressure, especially like as Tony mentioned, coming from turkey calling. I think most turkey callers are used to putting a lot of pressure on that latex, and that can really be a detriment to elk calling, especially when you try to get good control of the sounds. So going with that medium latex, medium stretch on a medium frame, and then learning how to control that, going with a light amount of tongue pressure, a light amount of air pressure, just to simply make the sound. So what we're going to look at today is the Elk 101 diaphragms from Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. I have 3 of them here. They come, you can buy them in the 3-pack, so one of each of the different diaphragms, or if you know which one you like, you can purchase just that diaphragm. But the differences between them, the All-Star was kind of the first Elk 101 diaphragm, and it's got the medium stretch, the medium latex, the medium frame. It does have the plastic dome on the top, the tone slot technology, that really takes the place of the roof of your mouth, so you don't have to push that diaphragm up into the roof of your mouth. But with this diaphragm, I'm able to make every cow call, every bugle, and really hit them really well. It's kind of that sweet spot where it optimizes both the cow sounds and the bugles. From there, the next call that came out is the Contender. And the Contender was designed more for longevity. So it's designed to last longer, which means we're going to use a thicker latex. And that latex is just going to be more durable and last, especially if you're used to putting more tongue pressure on the call. So this one is going to be more for bugles. You're going to really be able to put a lot of pressure on it and really scream a bugle with it. Cow calls, it's still cow calls just fine, but you're going to lose a little bit of that sweet nasally sound that a lighter latex is going to provide. And that brings me to the last one, which is the newest diaphragm in the Elk 101 Signature Series line, and that's the Champ. And the Champ is a light latex, and it's got a medium stretch. So this one's going to be well suited for cow calls, and it's going to give you just those sweet, soft cow calls. The great thing about the Champ is it's also going to scream some incredible bugles. So if you watched our Destination Elk series last year, I used the Champ the entire time, and it bugled incredibly well. Screams, those high-pitched challenge bugles. I can still get the deep guttural sound on the bugles, but the cow calls are phenomenal as well. So that's kind of a rundown there of 3 different diaphragms that are kind of suited for 3 different calling styles. I would suggest getting one of each in the 3-pack and just giving it a try. See which one fits you in your calling style. From there, you're able to order more of that one. If you already know your calling style, if you're coming from a turkey background, you put a lot of pressure on the calls, the Contender is probably going to be more suited for you. If you're looking for that middle of the road, the call that does everything, the All-Star. And then if you want one that has, it just gives you the most control over your diaphragm and over the sounds you make with it, the Champ's going to be the one there. So I'll demonstrate each one here really quickly for you. These are coming straight out of the package, brand new with no real manipulation or anything. I will show you a trick though that helps kind of seat that latex, because when the latex is taken off of or put on the frame, it's stretched a little tighter than where you actually want it for optimal use. And what that's going to do is allow it time to break in. As you use it, it's not going to fall out of range. So it's going to be stretched a little tighter so you can kind of seat into the ideal location and stretch of that latex. So what I'll do a lot of times is just take 2 fingers and just pinch that latex and just real lightly tug on it just a little bit. You don't want to pull it out, you don't want to stretch it or rip it or anything. Just kind of seat it in place a little bit there. The other thing is the latex comes pre-coated with just a non-stick powder that helps it not stick together on the roll as it's being used to manufacture the calls. So a lot of times I'll just lick my finger and just kind of rub it off on both sides. And that'll help that latex. It gets rid of that. It's a very fine powder. You probably wouldn't even notice it. It won't affect the chain or the sound of the call or anything, but that helps get it so that latex is just really smooth and the sounds are able to roll right off your tongue. So here's the Champ. It's right out of the package, and I'll demonstrate the cow calls with it. You can see it just makes those soft, sweet cow calls. There's no pop in the middle of it at all that we might get as we get into a thicker latex or a more stretched latex. So cow calls straight out of the package are just, they're absolutely pitch perfect and sound great with this diaphragm. And then for the bugles, again, it's a light latex. If you blow too hard, you're going to stall it out on the top. So we're going to want to keep it more consistent with our tongue pressure and air pressure. And you can see there it went straight to that high shrill note and kind of almost wanted to stall out there. So I'm going to back off just a little bit on the tongue and air pressure and show a little more control on that call. So again, a great call, a great diaphragm for doing everything, probably more suited for cow calls, but will definitely bugle. If you have troubles making noise with the diaphragm, this one's going to get you on the board. You're going to be able to make noise with it simply by putting it in, seating it where it's comfortable. And I always tell people, just say the word hiss. And that formation of the S at the end of the word hiss is going to put your tongue in that right position to be able to make a sound. So when you say the S sound at the end of hiss, your tongue's coming up to the roof of your mouth and it actually contacts the latex with the proper amount of airflow over the latex, and you're able to make a sound. From there, it's just a matter of controlling that sound. So we're going to move on now to the next one, which is the All-Star. And again, this is the medium latex, medium stretch, very versatile diaphragm that's going to be able to make any sound you need to and really be optimized for both cow calls and bugles. Again, just seating that latex a little bit, you can feel it's a little stiffer in there. That's due to it being a thicker latex. Just take and rub off the residue on that. Okay, and so I'll start out again with just a cow sound. Again, great sounding cow calls, a little bit higher pitch, which it'll seed in a little bit as you use it and get some use on it and that latex settles. But out of the package, great for cow calls. And then the thing I love about the All-Star is the screaming bugles. I can put more pressure on it. I can really get aggressive and bugle hard with the All-Star diaphragm. Again, transitioning from the Champ, where I had light pressure, light tongue and air pressure. Now with the All-Star, I've got to put a little bit more pressure on it. So that one, I actually held back a little bit on the pressure, and you'll notice when I got up towards that high note, I had to push just a little bit harder to get it up there. So I'll transition a little bit more smoothly here with this call. Again, so that's the All-Star, giving you kind of the best of both worlds for cow calls and bugles. It's a medium latex, medium frame, medium stretch, and would probably be the one that I would suggest for anyone starting out as a new elk caller or anyone who's had troubles getting diaphragm elk calls to work. And the last one out of the package is the Contender diaphragm. And again, this one was built for longevity. It was made to last. So as you're putting pressure on these calls day after day throughout the elk season, practicing in the off season, the latex is going to stretch and it's going to eventually break down and wear out a little bit. And when that happens, it becomes softer, it stretches more, and it makes it really difficult to hit those high notes. So the contender, the beauty of it is with the thicker latex, it's going to last longer and take more calling abuse than maybe something with a lighter latex. So I'll pull it out here. I will seat the latex a little bit. And again, this one you can feel is super thick. You'll notice all three of the calls use the natural clear latex, has no additives, no dyes or anything added to it, so it's not going to break down and be inconsistent. This is the most consistent latex that you can get for a diaphragm elk call. Okay, and as we cow call with this, again, this is not made for cow calling. It'll do a fine job. You'll be able to control the cow calls, but it's going to take a little bit more effort and maybe not be quite as sweet and soft as the Champ or the All-Star. So again, great sounding cow calls. Wouldn't even hesitate to use that in a hunting situation and know that it's going to perform great and sound just like a cow. The beauty of this though is the bugles, and you can really get after a bugle and put a lot of pressure and aggression into the bugle. The poor camera guy's back there holding his head because it's so loud in here in the room, but you can really get some volume out of this diaphragm. Again, it sounds great with cow calls. You can scream the bugles with it, full control over everything. But again, for somebody coming into it, they might pick up these three diaphragms and only be able to make sounds with one of them based on the shape of their palate, based on the style of calling, based on tongue pressure, air pressure, all of that. So it's important to be able to try a couple. The 3-pack from elk101.com provides a light latex, a medium latex, and a heavier latex, all stretched differently to be able to give you a good variation and find out just exactly what's going to work for you. When it comes to learning how to use the diaphragms, I would refer you to the University of Elk Hunting online course. There's a full module just on learning to use diaphragm elk calls, and it goes through every mechanic, every fundamental, everything that goes into making the sound, controlling the sound, and sounding just like an elk. There are 6 videos that go through every step in the process to make sure that you're becoming the best elk caller that you can be. And if you use the code YouTube, since you're watching this video on YouTube, when you sign up for the University of Elk Hunting online course, it's going to save you $10. You're going to have access to the entire course, which is 45 or more chapters on every topic imaginable to help you become a better elk caller. And if you do sign up for the University of Elk Hunting online course, as a member of that course, you're going to save 15% on all of your hunting gear needs from the Elk 101 store. So when you go to order your elk calls, when you go to order your boots, your backpacks, your camouflage, anything, you're going to save 15%. Click the link down below in the notes for more information on the online course. And hopefully, Tony, this answers your question on how to get the most out of your diaphragm elk calls and be able to use them to maximize the sound and the quality that you're producing from those diaphragms. Thanks so much for joining us in today's episode. And if you've got a question about elk hunting, email it over to us at info@elk101.com and be sure to put Fire Away Q&A in the subject line. And we'll catch you in the next episode.